Deeper Dive presented by Fantasydraft.com. Dave Lochran, Ben Rasa, and the man himself, number 1 ranked DFS player in the world. It's Alex Baker. Awesome-o. Boys, how we doing today? Don't all jump in at once.
Great, man. Sunday morning. It's the best day of the week this time of year. Ready to talk another week of who to pick to win some of this big money out there.
You know what I call it? It's Christmas for adults. Ben, what's happening
here? It's pretty cold in New York. I'm not going to lie.
It's cold here too.
Yeah. So I guess that's good. I don't know. It's football weather. What can I say?
All right. We got 12 games. I'll tell you what, I'm still getting over some type of sickness. I guess that's what happens when you're in airports for 2 straight days. And everyone's walking around with SARS masks. It's kind of scary. Ben, I know you're on the same page. You see one of those, you walk the other direction, right?
Oh, yeah. No, that's, I'm still sick. Me and Laffy took a trip to California like 3 years ago, and I'm still getting over that illness. When you don't go outside,
we got deathly ill from that.
Oh yeah, no, I never recovered from that, as you can see from the stream. So you got to be careful in those airports, that's for sure.
You know what it is? We went from like 80-degree weather to 20-degree weather overnight.
Yep, that was incredibly bad.
Did not serve us well.
No. Nope.
All right, let's just jump right into it. We got a lot to talk about. 12 games and injury news is rolling in, so we'll touch on that when we get there. Usually not as big a deal as other sports, but I'll ask anyway, Alex or Ben, whoever wants to jump in. Any weather concerns, wind, rain, monsoon, snow, sleet, hail that you want to talk about?
No, nothing for me.
I was pretty intrigued when you mentioned hail, actually. That could actually make a difference, I feel like. Like you throw the football and it hits a piece of hail and then it's like air and pass.
Yeah, it just like creates shrapnel and hits 8 players in the eye. It's a mess. Cleaning body parts up off the turf. But no, I think we're good. I mean, around this time of year, though, you start to see a little bit of weird weather. I think we're fine, though. So let's just get started. Alex, let's go to Carolina hosting the Jacksonville Jaguars. Cam Newton out again, clearly not looking to rush this guy back. Kyle Allen starting another game. Gardner Minshew. Nobody thought this would be the matchup going into the season, but here we are. Minshew's been decent enough. He's been fine. I'm not as impressed with him as other people, but I think he's been good enough to win games, and that's really all that matters. But looking at this matchup between the two, it's less about the quarterbacks, more about the running backs. Christian McCaffrey's played like 99% of offensive snaps this year, and the only game he didn't play 100% of them was when they had a very big late lead over the Cardinals, and I believe it was week 3 or 2 or 3. I think 3. So him and Leonard Fournette, who's going to see, not including running back or not including quarterback carries, he's going to see almost all of the carries out of the backfield for running backs. So both of these guys are just super high volume backs in a game that has a pretty low total, but shouldn't get out of hand on either side.
Yeah, I mean, the running backs should be the ones to target in this game for sure, like you mentioned. I have to go back to your Gardner Minshew take. Like, clearly you're not valuing swag enough in your evaluation there, because
the problem is I don't consider that swag. I just consider that goofiness. But go ahead.
You're not really into that 70s style, I take it.
No, it's not my. I love what they did with Uncle Rico and actually getting them together. It's the first time I've seen Uncle Rico since Napoleon Dynamite, and I was in high school. So I mean, that's cool for him and all. But yeah, no, the 70s porn look isn't my style.
Man, I'm hoping it makes a comeback. I kind of like that style, but
Would
anyway.
You rock it? Would you go full out mustache?
I think I would, yeah. I've tried it, but anyway, back to the football. Before I get into my 70s porn opinions, I think that Leonard Fournette and Christian McCaffrey are probably my top running backs of the slate, because you said it, they're out there the whole game, and that's extremely unusual. And they're the only 2 guys. Oh, maybe you throw Le'Veon Bell in there, and those 3 guys are just like getting way more volume than anyone else, and that makes them really appealing.
Ben, I understand the allure when it comes to classic cars, vintage clothing even, but 70s porn. There's nothing redeeming about it.
No, we evolved from that. I don't think we need to go full circle. So yeah, I'm not the biggest Minshew guy either. To try to tie it back to football before we go completely off the rails, as Alex said,
we still got an hour and 8 minutes.
Yeah, we're starting off very strong here. When you're on the field this much, I mean, we know McCaffrey because he's just unbelievable. But even for Fournette, the volume is just so massive. Carolina, the way to attack them would be with the run. Short is on IR, who's their good D tackle. The question is for me, does the game kind of get grinded out if both teams are controlling the ball on the clock? Are there other weapons to go to, whether it's a Curtis Samuel, a D.D. Westbrook? Those guys feel more like one-offs to me, not a priority. It's just basically the running backs from this game.
Now, are they priorities for you, both running backs?
So, we're going to talk about, of course, all the games. There's, I think, enough value at wide receiver and tight end where I can get Christian McCaffrey wherever I want him, and I don't know why I'm passing on him, for the sake he just fits the build. It's not as big an opportunity cost. So he's in a ton of my lineups, obviously, like many other people. Fournette I'm using, but there are other backs in that range too that I think make really interesting plays on the slate.
Is Mixon one of them?
Of course he's one of them. Orange right under here for the old Bungles.
I'm big on Joe Mixon today. And if you guys are all right with it, we can get to that game right now.
I got nothing else.
Why beat around the bush, right?
Yeah.
I see what you did there. Carolina, though, before we do, first of all, Carolina defense has been very good, at least in the secondary. But with Jalen Ramsey out, is there any interest in the passing game for the Panthers, Alex?
Honestly, I mean, they're definitely not a top play. But whenever you have McCaffrey in, that makes a pretty nice guy to stack up with your QB. And then Curtis Samuel, DJ Moore are options. So I wouldn't rule it out. Kyle Allen's been good enough. But as we're talking about, these running backs are just the main attraction here.
Yep, no question. All right, so we get to Cincinnati. And Ben, Joe Mixon last week, I pointed this out in one of our strategy shows earlier this week. He had 20 total looks before the fourth quarter, 3 minutes into the fourth quarter. So 47 and a half, 48 minutes into the game. He had already seen 20 total looks to Gio Bernard's 1. And then Gio Bernard got mop-up duty in a game that was completely out of reach. We haven't really seen Cincinnati in a favorable game script outside of week 1, or at least a neutral game script, which came against Seattle. But Mixon clearly wasn't at full health there. We saw that he wasn't healthy, and he left the game injured anyway. So this could be the first time we see him healthy and in a favorable or neutral game script. I think you see him get a ton of opportunities today. And yes, the line has struggled, not just in pass protection, but run protection as well, run defense as well. Run protection. They've been stuffed the second most times in the league. Adjusted line yards is second worst. You can go down the list. But I still think in a spot like this, where they're going to see an added amount of opportunities, Mixon really jumps off the board to me. So
you highlighted, obviously, if your offensive line is so bad that they can't allow, he's getting hit in the backfield, there's nothing you can really do. And I do think that is a range of outcomes where Mixon, he's just not able to generate much. But on the other side of this, the Bengals are favored in this game. We have not seen that. We have not seen them play from ahead. And against Arizona, where we know there's going to be extra plays on all sides of the ball, I don't think it's unreasonable to see Mixon really, put forward an effort that I thought we'd see more of this year, to be honest. But they just haven't they've been in catch-up mode. The offensive line is terrible. But the price is reasonable, $7,100 on FanDuel, $61 on DraftKings. I have no problem going to him as one of those mid-range running backs.
Yeah, me neither. Is he as exclusive as Leonard Fournette? Maybe not. But I think that the matchup is really solid. And like you said, it's rare that this team is favored. What are your thoughts on Joe Mixon here, Alex?
I like him. I think he's this is definitely the best spot that Cincinnati is going to be in all year, which is really important because they're not that good of a team. Mm-hmm. And as Ben was mentioning, they're favored. That should give a little bit more work to the running back that does most of the work in the run game, Mixon. and I think he makes a really nice play today.
What about the passing game? We'll get to Arizona in a moment. Auden Tate obviously getting quite a bit of ownership, not a surprise to anybody. And then, of course, Tyler Boyd going up against the Arizona Cardinals, who, defensively have been mediocre at best. But the way that their offense plays, that Cincinnati's going to be on the field for a decent amount as well. And, of course, Tyler Eifert is another one. So this is a game that we can attack from a million different angles. How are we attacking the Cincinnati pass game?
I think Auden Tate is one of the top plays of the slate for sure. He is different than your typical replacement level player because when he's been on the field, he's been targeted at a high rate. He hasn't played as many snaps this year because John Ross was getting more snaps, and now he's injured. So I think that opens up some opportunity for Tate to play most of the game. And if he's on the field most of the game, I think that will equal the targets. So he makes a really nice play. And then Tyler Boyd, he hasn't really materialized thus far, but he's been getting the volume. So he might be that kind of Leonard Fournette from last week where he just hasn't produced the fantasy numbers yet, but they'll come. And I'm hoping it's going to be this week because I'm going to have a ton of them.
Okay. Yeah, what about you, Ben?
So it's always a little freaky when you're Rashard Higgins from last year style, where you're just putting in someone you barely knew existed and they're going to be popular. Having said that, Auden Tate, he seems, he's a big guy. So red zone, they look to him against the Steelers. And as Alex said, it's not like he's done nothing and now he's being thrust into a new role. He's had targets, certainly in the Bills game, certainly last week. And now it should just be more of the same, obviously with Ross out. So he opens up a ton. It's hard not to basically Cincy across the board. The question for me is how much Dalton do you pair? Because certainly if you're running a couple of these receivers, it's going to make sense. And that's where I'm struggling because I think it's a pretty easy case for Boyd and Tate. We mentioned Mixon. We're going to mention Eifert, of course. You got a lot of options for how you want to attack this Cardinals defense.
Right. And how many of these guys are willing to play in the same lineup, I guess would be a question here.
So that's the thing. I think at a certain point, you have to use Dalton if you're really going to load up because how are they all getting there without him? That's the tricky part. They're cheap enough, Tate specifically, where, he's not breaking the bank. Eifert's cheap as well. So, but when I'm using Boyd and Tate together, I'm forced to really roll Dalton.
Okay. Yeah, I'm on the same page. Alex, where it's Boyd, Eifert, Auden Tate, you are forced to roll Eifert out there. If you're not you don't have to. You could probably play Kyler Murray and a few of his pass catchers as well. We'll get there in a second. But how much? Well, I guess I'll put it this way: how much do Andy Dalton do you see yourself getting to?
I have to agree with you guys. I think if you have Boyd and you have Tate, then it's hard not to have Dalton because really you're hoping for not only an average performance from these guys, but kind of an outlier performance. And if these guys are each getting touchdowns and 100 yards, that means Dalton's having a big game too. So it makes a lot of sense if you have both to have Dalton. It's probably a disadvantage to teams that have him if you have both, but without him. So for that reason, I'll probably be going for one or the other in most lineups. But I think Dalton is kind of a sneaky play because people are aware of the fact that he's not a very good fantasy football quarterback because he doesn't really do that much other than throw. So I think he will be a little bit less popular than this game kind of dictates he should be.
Okay. Ben, what about the Cardinals side of the ball? Kyler Murray and the Cardinals playing at a lightning fast pace. And I guess it's funny. Manny, Laura, and I were on Awesemo Radio yesterday. Sirius XM Fantasy, by the way, Sirius 210 XM87, 5 to 7 Saturday, 7 to 9 Eastern Sunday. And he had mentioned, would you rather have 40 passes from Kyler Murray or 20 from Mahomes? Now, obviously, he'd still take the 40 from Murray, but the point was more so where every time Patrick Mahomes throws the ball, there's an opportunity to rip off a 70-yard passing touchdown. With Kyler Murray, we saw Christian Kirk go 10 for 59 the other week. He is not I think he's actually top 10 in deep balls. He's 10th. So that's good. And Fitzgerald has seen a decent amount of them. But I guess the question would be like, how do you grade out this Arizona offense without Christian Kirk and currently waiting on Damiere Byrd's status?
Yeah, it's bad. I mean, this is one of these, you gotta evaluate efficiency, but then also again volume. And the Cardinals are wildly inefficient, but they run a ton of plays. And Kyler Murray's been bad, and he's still, if you look at the performances on a strictly just fantasy point basis, it hasn't been that bad.
Right.
So I think we're all seeing that eventually he's going to play better, and he's going to have a huge game. Whether that's him breaking off a long run or maybe carving up a secondary if he cannot take 10 sacks. Which has just been awful for a guy that's supposed to be elusive. It's hard. I mean, how could I not love this game? We got David Johnson that I could play. I could play Mixon, all my favorites. On the outside, it's a little tough. I'm not really looking to, Trent Sherfield and Keyshawn Johnson. I think guys like Tate, and there's some other value that I prefer. So it's basically for me sticking with the more known commodities on both sides of the ball.
Okay. Yeah. I guess that is the case. I mean, you're always looking for viable pivots, Alex. Like, could Sherfield be a pivot off of Auden Tate? But it just doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel right either.
Yeah, I think that with Kirk out and probably Bird out from what I've seen, I know he's questionable. I think that opens up some opportunity, but it's not a lot of opportunity. So Sherfield could have a big game. Definitely a dart throw play, so it'll depend a lot on the ownership whether I end up there. Also, a guy I think might play more than you expect is Pharaoh Cooper. From what I understand, Andy Isabella isn't really in their slot rotation, and that would be the position they need to fill. So Pharaoh Cooper might slot in and play a lot of the game. I don't even know if he's in the player pool on any of the sites, but that would be like an extreme dart throw.
He's not.
So he'll be very low on that, that's for sure.
Let's for a second talk about David Johnson, Ben, because he has not been super heavily involved in the run game. That's because Cliff Kingsbury's offense is not running the ball a ton, but he's surely made up for it in the passing attack. I mean, he's had 20 targets over his last 2 games. He had only 1 against Baltimore, but he was injured there. So in the games where he played the entirety of them, 11, 9, and 7 targets, 8, 6, and 6 receptions, 2 receiving touchdowns. And he's the type of guy that can break off monster plays in really any phase of the offense, or, passing, running, doesn't matter. Like, is that okay with you, knowing that maybe he only gets 13 carries or 12 carries, but 10 targets? Because in full PPR, the targets are gold.
For sure. And, I think a lot of times, and I'm guilty of this just like everyone else, you see like, oh, Kirk is out, Bird is out. Who are these new guys that are going to catch all these passes?
Exactly.
It's just David Johnson, and they just give it to him. Again, a known commodity rather than these creative players that we have no idea. So I'm more, this is a great game script, not just for the Bengals. I mean, yeah, the Bengals are a 3-point favorite, but this is another opportunity for Arizona possibly to get ahead. And that would mean maybe more David Johnson on the ground. So he makes a great play if you want to try to pair him up with someone like McCaffrey, or if you say, you know what, I think he can keep pace with him. I'm going to try to steal some salary and bump down a little bit. What
about you, Alex? Do you have the same opinion here?
Yeah, I mean, Johnson is one of the top options this week, I think. I have to agree with you guys. I love this game. I think whenever you get 2 really bad teams against each other, that's great for fantasy. And that's going to really elevate every player on both sides to be good plays compared to their salary this week.
Anything else from this game? Any interest in the Bengals defense just based on the pace for Arizona, or are we staying away from both defenses here?
I know the Bengals defense is going to be one of the more popular of the week because they're pretty cheap. So I think they're a good play. In lineups where I don't have a piece of the game, I think that'd be a nice filler.
Okay. What about you, Ben?
Same. This is a game where the range of outcomes is so big. You truly can make, even though it's a 12-game slate, you have to think about this almost in a showdown mentality of like where I don't have heavy exposure to these offenses. I have no problem rolling a defense because we could see Kyler Murray take 8 more sacks and fumble, 3 times. That's certainly viable.
Okay. New Orleans, actually, no. Houston and Atlanta. Here's a really interesting one. Ben, I got to let my dog out. Do me a favor. She's crying. Can you take over for 2 seconds?
Absolutely. Take it away.
By the way, I saw the Thursday night show. You guys killed it.
That's what we do.
1-1. Pretty fantastic. I was impressed. So,
yeah. Go handle the animals. I will say, we're getting all the good games right in front here because this is another one. It's got the highest total on the slate at 50. Houston 4-point favorite. And I look at these two teams. We just mentioned, Alex, you're talking about just bad teams. I guess they're not bad teams, but they're certainly not clicking on all cylinders. And there's a lot of ways I think this game shoots out. The total is rising, as I just said. We got Deshaun Watson and his gang on one side. We've got Matt Ryan and Julio on the other side. Both these quarterbacks are in play for me. Is there one side that you're leaning to, or is this another game where you see yourself having a lot of different options?
I really like Atlanta pretty much every time they're on the main slate because they pass the ball so much, and that makes it a really appealing opportunity for stacking. And also maybe like for one-offs because you guys get like more targets. On my top stacks tool, Atlanta consistently kind of overperforms their ownership. So I think they make a really nice stack. Let me pull that up so I can kind of give you guys a sneak of that. And Deshaun Watson also has some pretty good options to pair with as a stack with Hopkins and Fuller. So I like both sides of this game. Atlanta, actually, it depends a lot on the site you're playing on. On Draftkings, we're projecting Ryan for 12% ownership. On Fanduel, it's only 6. On Yahoo, 3. And on Fantasydraft, 9. So it's really all over the place. So it's going to I'm going to like them the most on Yahoo and Fanduel where they're super low, but great stack.
For sure. And we've seen the Falcons look pretty bad, but at the same time, it doesn't equate in fantasy. Ryan is throwing the ball all over the place. The tricky part for me, we know Julio is unbelievable, of course. Austin Hooper is really becoming a focal point of this offense. And that means, I don't know if it's completely at the detriment of Calvin Ridley, but lately it has been. And then you have Sanu, who's also getting the targets right now. If you do go to Atlanta, say on a site, where the ownership's a little lower, are you going to try to get Julio in those stacks? Or are you going to go to Hooper, maybe pair a couple of those guys up? Or do you think someone like Calvin Ridley will return to more of an integral part of the offense?
I mean, I honestly think you could just throw a dart here and pick any of the 4. They're all good enough. Julio, I'm a little down on compared to previous years because he's just not on the field quite as much as I would like. He doesn't get quite as many passing routes compared to the passing plays the team has compared to other top-end receivers, so that's kind of a knock against them. So I think it's going to be hard for him to kind of maintain that 100 yards a game that we've been seeing in previous years, but still an excellent play. I mean, could have a great game every week. And Hooper, as you mentioned, kind of having a great fantasy season, so maybe that'd be a reason to go to Ridley or Sanu because they might be a little bit more under the radar.
For sure. Ridley's the wild card for me. I think seeing how bad he's been relative to his output has really made everyone sour, and they see Hooper emerging. But I still think those monster games are there for Calvin Ridley. And could this be one of those spots? Well, if the ownership dictates he's not going to be a focal point of those stacks, I may try to slide him in some of these teams.
What are you doing with Hooper, though, Ben?
He's been so good, and it's hard to ignore.
It's so tough to get to a bunch of Hooper when I don't know. Maybe it's just a gut feeling, and you never want to operate off of gut feeling. But he's not going to be overlooked on this slate at all. And I don't know. I'm having trouble with it. I'm more along the lines of like go to Ridley here. I think I just heard you mention that as well, because Ridley's just been completely ignored after a couple bad games.
Yeah, I think that this is a team where when I'm looking to Matt Ryan, I'm really trying to mix and match because I don't think that we can confidently say that Austin Hooper is going to continue to see this kind of work and this kind of production. He is right now, but there was a time where Ridley was doing this and Hooper was an afterthought. I think it's a pretty fluid situation. So if we're going to get a massive discount on some of these Atlanta weapons, I'm going to let that dictate, because this game, as I said, 50 over under, points are going to be coming, and we're not exactly sure where it'll come from on this Atlanta side.
How much do you think comes down to the fact that Julio is just seeing so much double coverage, blanket coverage, trying to take him out of the game, which, results in Hooper being, 15% today. We're projecting him for at awesemo.com. That's a lot of ownership at tight end.
Definitely. And yeah, I mean, when you have Julio, he's a lightning rod, but that can open it up for other weapons, not just Hooper.
If you were to rank them, Alex, who would your top options be for Atlanta?
Julio, of course, number one. Just based on the ownership, I think maybe I'd go Ridley 2, Hooper 3, Sanu 4.
Okay. Yeah, and another thing we shouldn't ignore is Hooper's very similarly priced to Darren Waller, and now Tyrell Williams is, as they stated, I think Ian Rappaport put it, or it could have been Schefter, he's a long shot to play. So this could be a monster PPR game for Darren Waller, even if he doesn't get a lot of or even if he doesn't rack up touchdowns and yards. I stepped away for a minute. So is there anything else that wasn't covered here for you guys?
No, I mean, we touched mostly on the Falcons. I'll just say for the Houston side, Deshaun Watson has shown, when he runs, he can find the end zone. We know he's mobile, monster, highest ceiling, I think, out there for quarterbacks. The Will Fuller thing is going to be really interesting because he's getting a ton of buzz across the industry. It does feel like he's close to breaking out. We haven't seen it yet. The ownership is really going to make it tough. I have my shares because I like this game, but man, it does feel like kind of a somewhat trap to follow the herd on this one.
Alex, let's talk about Duke Johnson for a minute. And I've been harping on this. By the way, where are you? Are you in an attic?
It's like a cabin that we're renting out for the weekend, me and some friends. So
nice.
It's actually crazy. I was worried about the Wi-Fi here, but it's faster than my home internet.
Never gonna
Not
leave.
as many people using it.
Yeah, that's probably the reason.
That's where is it?
It's in Gatlinburg, Tennessee.
Nice. Never heard.
It's pretty like touristy kind of area, I guess.
Cool. Are you in the woods?
Yeah, it's kind of like there's like some mountains, like the Smoky Mountains, and we got a view and stuff.
Nice,
so
man.
pretty sweet.
I love those places. Duke Johnson, though, I think he's been like criminally underused. Does that mean that he's going to be used more today? It doesn't. He's probably the cheapest he's going to be all season, though. Let's just talk about him for a moment, because you're looking at a running back who's averaging more than 6 yards per carry this season. Last week, 6 for 56 on the ground, 2 for 22 in the air. And week 2, 6 for 31, 5.2 yards per carry, 9 for 57 in week 1, 6.3 yards per carry. He has long runs this year of 40, 32, 19. Like, he makes big plays. He moves the chains and more, except Carlos Hyde has seemingly taken more of the work away and even saw more targets in the passing game last week. I saw an article yesterday that said Carlos Hyde likes how the work is being split between him and Duke Johnson. Well, of course he does. If you're getting the bulk of the work between a guy that, in my opinion, is better than you, of course you're going to be satisfied with that. But is there any merit to targeting Duke Johnson today as someone that'll go unowned but has that explosive ability?
I think you said it better than I can. So like, there's always a reason to go for that kind of player. But it's definitely kind of a GPP like flyer more than a core play, because man, they're just splitting the work like 50-50 in Houston with running backs. So it's not really that appealing for either guy.
All right, Ben, you and I usually have we can usually take each other's pulses on this one. What are you doing with the backfield here in Houston?
So I'm with you. The Devin Singletary is carrying over in this situation.
Oh, that pisses me off.
I don't get it. But having said that, I've really tried to make an effort of just in betting and in DFS and in life, not evaluating things on what should happen, evaluating on what's going to happen.
Right.
Duke Johnson should be an integral part of this offense, and he should have a ton of opportunity today. But if he gets 7 touches, it's going to be very difficult to really. Oh wow. there's another person to get going. So I'm more skeptical. I did use them in some massive stacks of this game, but other than that, I don't have a ton of them just because you can't trust it.
Okay. I know. That's pretty much okay. Would you pair him with Deshaun Watson?
Absolutely. I think if you're rolling him, for me, it's a full onslaught. This game is going to get out of control, and Duke Johnson is going to catch, multiple long passes and maybe break one.
Right. Yeah. Normally, I don't want to pair somebody with the quarterback if I don't have a lot of faith in their usage. But I think Duke Johnson is at least capable of making big plays. And Ben, one more reason for that before we move on. Outside of Hopkins and Fuller, if you're throwing Watson out there, it's not like you feel great about like Jordan Atkins or Kenny Stills if he plays, or Kike Coutee. Like, it's Hopkins and Fuller for the most part. Is it really any more risky playing Duke over Coutee or Stills? The answer is a definitive no.
No. And I have him in lineups. I don't have the other two. So
right.
I'm with you. I absolutely think on that merit. The question is, again, though, do we need to go to any of them? That's what or do we stick to Hopkins and maybe some Fuller because we know that the big game is probably coming at some point?
Reasonable enough. All right, let's move on. Alex, we go to you. New Orleans, Tampa Bay. No Drew Brees, but he does look like he's ahead of schedule. He just posted something on Instagram yesterday that looks pretty encouraging. If you're a Drew Brees guy, if you own him, or if you're just a Saints fan, or if you have Alvin Kamara, Michael Thomas, or anyone in this offense. Teddy Bridgewater has the lowest ADOT in the league since he took over. That's what we should have expected. I think Mason Rudolph will beat him out on that by week 5, by this week. He had 8 out of 3 last week, which is just silly. But Bridgewater's not taking shots. I'll tell you right now, I wrote the NFL Pivot. It's a premium article, but it's on awesemo.com. You can find that. There was one guy that stood out to me. Just give you a little bit of a look in behind the curtain. Tyler Eifert right now is projected for the highest ownership at tight end, which I don't have an issue with. I understand why. His team has an implied total above 25. You rarely see that. As Ben pointed out, they are favored by 3 points at home. But Jared Cook, on the other hand, is going almost entirely overlooked. And normally you'd say, all right, well, he should be. Well, it's really not any different a spot than Eifert. It's the second best matchup for tight ends on the season. Tampa Bay is allowing the second most fantasy points, the second most yards, and the most attempts to tight ends. Jared Cook has seen 6 or more targets in 2 of the 3 games that Bridgewater has played. And he's basically the same price as Tyler Eifert. I could go on, but basically, and by the way, they've given up huge games to Olsen, to Ingram, to a combined Gerald Everett and Tyler Higbee, and Cook's running more routes than Eifert, playing more snaps. He's somebody that I'm probably going to have a decent amount of interest in today against the team that's just been carved up by opposing tight ends. And then, of course, we talk about Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara. Floor's yours, Alex.
Yeah, I mean, when you're talking about a quarterback who throws short passes, Kumara and Thomas should benefit from that a ton.
I think Cook will too, though.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think Thomas and Kamara, their prices have become a little bit more reasonable to adjust for Breeze being out, and they have a pretty nice matchup today. So I think that this might be the game. I take some shares of Teddy Bridgewater and kind of hope that he can have a big game.
Okay. What about you when it comes to this Saints team, Ben?
So I think in general, they're shifting slightly in the sense that I like the under in this game. I'll say that. I think it's a little more grinded out. Bridgewater, don't turn the ball over, be more effective. Lean on your 2 unbelievable players. And as you guys mentioned, it's not a huge deal for them. They're going to get the volume, maybe the explosiveness taken away. But with Kumara, he can create that himself. So I don't worry about that. The Bucs are number 1 DVOA against the run. So pounding it up the middle doesn't make sense anyway. They should try to get to the outside here. It's a game where, it's an opportunity cost for me, mostly at running back because we've got, McCaffrey. We haven't talked about Zeke or Dalvin Cook yet. We mentioned David Johnson. There's a lot of top-end backs. So Kumara is in the mix, but he is not at the top of that list for me. Michael Thomas a little easier to get to in my eyes.
Okay. Any thoughts on Jared Cook?
So I think you summed it up nicely. Tyler Eifert, I think they're both to really get their touchdown dependent. And in the sense that I don't think Eifert is that much more likely to fall in the end zone. I know he's got the matchup of all matchups, and it's just going to carry over because Disley got it done last week. That hurts Eifert. Like, there's obviously, I think, minimal correlation between Disley working out. I know it's Arizona, but still. So I'm looking for one-offs. I have another one that we'll get to. But Jared Cook, no problem if you wanted to go there and go against the grain.
And by the way, the Bengals and Saints have a 0.5 difference in implied point total this week. So it's not like, people, I think sometimes we get tunnel vision where it's like, oh man, Bengals have a 24.8 implied total. They're 3-point favorite. Well, yeah, but just because they have that doesn't mean other teams aren't in good spots too. And I think you get enamored with the Bengals because every week their total is so low and they're such big dogs. So, just because a team's favorite and finally is in a good spot doesn't mean that other guys aren't. And that's why I think Eifert's just going totally, or Cook's going totally overlooked, when I could make a very good argument for him actually being someone that should be higher owned than Eifert, but he won't be at all. Actually, he'll probably be 1/5 or 1/6 of the ownership. Tampa Bay, Alex, the other side of this game, Bucks coming off a monster road win against the Rams, dropped 55 points on them. Now here they are going up against a Saints team without Drew Brees. They are 3-point dogs on the road, 45.5 total. What do you make of this Bucks team that Mike Evans has had some serious issues with Marshawn Lattimore in the past?
I think that I like the Bucks a lot. They just throw the ball a ton, and that makes really good upside for guys like Evans and Godwin. So every week those guys could break the slate like they have in the previous couple weeks. But the secret's the cat's out of the bag here. So I think that people have caught on to them. Their prices have gone up. So they're not as appealing as they were prior to the breakout performances. But I still think they have a pretty good shot of being the top team of the day.
Okay, Ben, what about this for you? Bucks and game stacks here.
So, Alex talked about it. The numbers don't lie against the Giants. Mike Evans was the play. Godwin last week at like 0.5%. You're not going to get these guys at 0.5%. That's for sure. And the prices have also caught up a little bit. It just makes the margins that much more narrow. It doesn't mean it can't work. It's just, if it does, you're not going to be playing against 0.5%. You're going to have a wider net, and B, they need to really get it going because the prices have increased. So I've tempered expectations a bit. The Bucks are always super viable because they're a high variance team with Jameis out there. Maybe the game gets going. But at the same time, there are other games that we, particularly games we've talked about already, that I just like better.
Okay. Me too. I think this game could turn into a shootout. I do. But I definitely like Godwin more. And I do want to get your take on Ronald Jones. Similar to Duke Johnson, Ronald Jones has been the superior back in Tampa Bay over the past several weeks. And we've seen that reflected in snap counts. We've seen that reflected in a variety of areas. Like his snaps, he outsnapped Peyton Barber by almost 20 last week. And that's the first time he's outsnapped him since week 1. Not only that, but he's been efficient on the ground, and in the scarce use that he's gotten in through the air, he's been very effective as well. So I think this might not be the spot for him against a very good run defense that just shut down Ezekiel Elliott and the Cowboys run game. But Ronald Jones will be a guy I'm keeping a close eye on going forward.
Same. Not the right matchup for me, but someone to kind of stash for upcoming weeks because he's starting to, and I hope the Bucks are kind of following. He's starting to take over that backfield, in my opinion, as he should.
As he should. Alex, any thoughts on Ronald Jones or anything else from this game before we move on?
Yeah, I think he's probably my preferred option over Peyton Barber, but probably won't land on him because, as you guys are saying, tough matchup, and it is kind of a even split at this point.
Okay. Let's move on to the Giants in Minnesota. Alex, we'll kick it off with you. Stefon Diggs is active. At this point, I don't even know if Mike Zimmer is going to like bench him for the first quarter, not look his way. This doesn't feel like a squeaky wheel getting the grease type of situation. For anyone that hasn't been following along all week, Stefon Diggs is voiced concerns and frustrations about his usage in the offense. Not as much like overtly talking about it, but when asked about it, he said there's truth to all rumors, so on and so forth. And when Mike Zimmer was asked about how they'll address it, he just said, we'll see. So it's tough. Adam Thielen was upset about it after last game where they scored only 6 points against Chicago. Just to kind of set the backdrop here, Alex, I don't want to say there's turmoil in Minnesota, but things are definitely in flux. And if they were to keep running the offense the way they did through 4 weeks, Dalvin Cook is clearly a very appealing option. But even in that case, how do you prioritize him over Christian McCaffrey, Ezekiel Elliott playing this week? What are you doing with this Minnesota side of the ball?
Yeah, man. Like, I can understand why Diggs is frustrated because they just throw the ball. Or, I mean, they run the ball an irrational amount in Minnesota when they have such good receivers with Diggs and Thielen. Like, it makes no sense, like, from a strategic standpoint. But, I mean, this is a much better matchup versus the Giants than it was last week versus the Bears, where they got kind of, like, shut down. And what I'll expect is they're probably going to continue running the ball at the rate we're accustomed to, because that'll be a easy recipe to win the game. So I'm not really high on the wide receivers here because they just don't throw the ball enough. And I also think there's this prevailing wisdom in the community from all the content I've observed that people are really buying into the squeaky wheel narrative. So I don't think it will be as sneaky as you expect.
Yeah, I'm with you. And you said sneaky, but I'll say squeaky in the sense that, like, we're just assuming that Mike Zimmer is going to give into this. And I don't know, Ben, I could be entirely wrong here. He doesn't seem like the type of guy that's like, okay, I surrender. Let's get Diggs the ball 46 times today.
Yeah, not in a game like this. That's the problem. So Cousins, I mean, he hasn't been throwing the ball at all. But if you really want to look at the splits, the only games where he threw it a decent amount was when they were losing.
Yeah, and he has sucked throwing the ball. He's got 3 touchdowns to 2 interceptions. The numbers have not looked good for Kirk Cousins either.
No, it's been bad. I guess this is becoming the theme of the show, where I've talked about with Duke Johnson and this. It's a fine line between what they should do and what they are going to do. I think that they would be better served opening it up and being more balanced, because they have 2 unbelievable receivers. Cousins, you could say what you want about him, but we know he does have some upside when he's slinging it around, and it would make Dalvin Cook that much more effective. I don't think that's going to happen. I think once again they're going to control this game on the ground. Maybe there's a little boost, but you have to weigh that against the narrative and the overweight people are giving these Thielen comments. So I may look to Thielen on some rosters, but I'm not overhauling my Viking situation based on what we heard this week.
What about Dalvin Cook?
Well, he's very, very, very good. Again, he's up there with the top price backs, as he should be. It's hard because last week we saw him. I don't discount anything. He went against the Bears. I had zero interest there, as did most people. The Bears are an unbelievable defense. Now he gets a much better spot. I think for me, I'm going to kind of split hairs in the sense that I kind of like him for cash. I think we know the floor is there, but there's some other guys that I'm willing to roll the dice on that maybe can get going just a little bit more.
Okay. What about you though, on Dalvin Cook, Alex? And I do want to make sure that we touch enough on all of these top priced running backs, because we already got to Christian McCaffrey and we all agree that he's a phenomenal play every single week. When you're on the field for every snap, good things happen. But there is Dalvin Cook against the Giants, where they're road favorites. There is Alvin Kamara against Tampa Bay. There is David Johnson. Like, there are a lot of top priced options. There Ezekiel Elliott against the Green Bay team that just saw their run defense get outright exposed by Jordan Howard and Miles Sanders. There are a lot of options here. Obviously, McCaffrey is the best just on volume alone, but like, what do we do with Dalvin Cook?
I think he's a good GPP play. I probably wouldn't have him in cash because It's a terrific matchup versus the Giants, but the bottom line is he just isn't on the field as much as Christian McCaffrey, as much as Fournette, and he's expensive. So I think Alexander Madison taking some of the plays away from him is the difference maker for me there.
Okay. Ben, any additional thoughts on that based on what Alex just said with Madison and such?
No, I think it's really just comes down to you're going to have to prioritize. I am mostly paying up at running back this week, just how my builds are falling. It's just there is some uncertainty maybe with these comments around the Vikings in general, if you want to weigh that in. And we just have other guys that between volume and just situation that I like a little bit better.
Okay. That sounds good to me. We're halfway through the show and halfway through the slate. Awesemo.com/join is where you can sign up. Get 50% off your first month of Awesemo Plus All Access monthly membership. Get 50% off your first month just by using the sign-up code Deeper Dive, all one word. It'll get you the ownership projections that we reference on all of these shows, the player projections, of course, the top stacks for football as well, and some awesome NBA content that's going to be coming down the pike this season. We've also got some premium preseason NBA content. Adam Scher and mostly Fast Eddie Fear getting it done behind the paywall, a free article as well. But there's so much right now at awesemo.com. We'd love for you to come check it out. And if you're not ready to sign up and open your wallet and get the best subscription that you can get in DFS, it is. Check it out with a free account and just, learn the site, see if you like it enough to dive in a little bit deeper. And if you decide to do that, use the sign-up code Deeper Dive, all one word, and come introduce yourself in our premium Slack chat. When you do, we're a friendly bunch. All right, let's keep it going. Chicago, Oakland. Alex, Tyrell Williams is unlikely to play, didn't practice all week. He's questionable, but was considered a long shot to play. Now, this is a 1 p.m. game, which, by the way, this game's in Oakland and it's a 1 p.m. game, or is this in London? Where is this
in
game?
London.
Yeah. It is in London?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I don't really pay attention to that stuff all that much. Not as much as I should. Are they doing all the London games at 1 now, Eastern time, and not 9:30 like they used to?
I hope so, man, because that makes it a lot better for fantasy.
I think it's because of the Raiders, because they don't want people on the West Coast watching the Raiders at like 6 a.m.
Good call. I bet you're right. Yep. Okay, so it'd be 11 there. Yeah, that makes sense. I don't know. I don't know why they'd want anyone watching the Raiders.
Correct.
No, I love Darren Waller as a tight end, and honestly, the Chicago Bears defense is so ridiculously good. It's one of the better defenses I've seen in a long time, Alex. But is this a spot where Darren Waller just continues to get massive volume of targets simply because he's on the field and because they need to get the ball to someone and because Tyrell Williams is out?
Yeah, I think it's exactly that. I mean, he's the guy that gets targeted the most on the team, and Tyrell Williams being out will only bolster his situation. Their wide receiver core behind Williams is pretty thin. So you got Trevor Davis, who played most of the game last week. You got Hunter Renfrow, who played about half the game last week. He's not really a fantasy option. JJ Nelson, kind of a deep ball threat. None of these guys are really that appealing, but I guess a lot of it is the Bears defense being so good.
It is, no question. Ben, I want to stay on Waller for a minute here because he has a 30% market share of targets. Like, that's pretty good, especially for a tight end. I haven't looked it up, but if I had to guess, he probably has the highest target share, maybe I'm wrong, of any tight end. Who else would it be?
Yeah, I mean, you think about Ingram, you think about Ertz, Kelsey. There's some of the big tight ends too, it's worth noting, are not on this slate. The Chiefs are not on the main slate. So Waller, it's interesting because I hate to take a team, the implied total for the Raiders right now is 16.5. And it clearly, that's a coin toss line. So it's possible they only manufacture points in the low teens or even lower than that.
Yeah.
And that makes it very difficult.
He hasn't scored this season.
That's See, this is why a couple years doing the game plan and we're connected. Having said that, he's been getting there without finding the end zone. So you have to figure at some point he's going to find one, and that's going to only bolster his production. Even if the Raiders only manufacture, say, 200 yards passing, which is ugly, you have to assume based on the other options, he's going to get a massive share of that. So on pure volume alone, even against what I think is far and away the best defense in the league, I don't mind if I have the salary to go get Waller.
By the way, 29%, well, 29.9% market or target share. No other tight end is above 25%.
There you go.
So that's pretty good. And the problem, Alex, is that the targets have to be so concentrated on this offense because, as you pointed out, who else are they going to throw to? Hunter Renfrow, JJ Nelson, like who is there?
Yeah, it sucks for the London football fans because they're expecting Antonio Brown a few weeks ago, and now they're getting JJ Nelson. So not a lot to look forward to as far as the wideouts here, but that should make it nice for Waller.
All right, what are your thoughts on David Montgomery coming into this game, having seen a lot more opportunities recently? 18 carries in week 2, 13 in week 3. Obviously, they got up very, very early, and he wasn't needed. But 21 last week against Minnesota, just using him to eat up time of possession, chew up the clock, and keep the ball out of the Vikings' hands, which they successfully did with Chase Daniels, not Mitchell Trubisky, at the helm. Any interest in Montgomery here? Despite his lack of efficiency, it does look like he's beginning to take over that bell cow role, at least on first and second downs. There doesn't seem to be any competition.
Yeah, I think Montgomery is a good fantasy play. He, as you're saying, he's kind of been taking the share of runs away from Mike Davis in the backfield, and now it's just a two-man crew with Cohen and Montgomery. And Cohen's not really a high volume runner, so that makes David Montgomery pretty secure. And the matchup is as good as you're gonna get for the game script. Maybe running the clock down with Montgomery. So I think it's a really good spot.
How about you, Ben?
I found myself mostly going up to get higher end running backs this week, but where I did need to spend down, I think there's no problem with him. Alex mentioned Tariq Cohen is more of that. He's going to get a handful of touches and maybe he breaks one, but David Montgomery is the guy who's really going to be pounding the ball. I worry a little bit just that they found a formula, and Chase Daniels furthers this point of just keep it low scoring, lean on this defense, low variance. That's not exactly what we want from a fantasy environment, but you can look to Montgomery kind of as a specific play.
Do you have interest in anyone else here?
Allen Robinson's kind of similar thoughts. I think he's just, Chase Daniel can still look to him, but it's not a high octane environment just in general.
Okay. Anything else in this game, Alex?
I really like I like some of the Bears skill position players, like Allen Robinson in particular. Just really good value this week, and Chase Daniel being a quarterback. I did notice they were throwing a lot more short passes than with Trubisky, but I don't think that it will be much of a difference for the wideouts here. So I think Allen Robinson is going to be a little bit sneaky.
Hell, it might even be better for all we know. In all seriousness, Trubisky has not looked that good at all. I think it's not an upgrade, but I think it's probably a lateral move from a fantasy standpoint.
Chase Daniel has been good throughout his NFL career, surprisingly good. I think his quarterback rating is higher than Trubisky. I don't know how he's never gotten a shot.
Yeah, no. I agree with you. I don't think he's by any stretch a bad backup. He definitely isn't. He was the highest paid backup with the Eagles in the league. He was the highest paid backup in 2016. He threw one pass. He completed it, by the way, for 16 yards.
Nice.
All right, Ben, Philly and New York Jets. I am on, I don't want to say an island here, but I am certainly, I think, different than a lot of people on this game because I know there's a lot of Carson Wentz love, and I get that. They are big favorites, second biggest favorites on the slate at home. They have one of the highest implied point totals. So all of that there's no arguments for me here. 29-point total. The argument for me is that this is a team that when they're firing on all cylinders, they're looking to run the ball as much as possible. And especially against a team that doesn't likely have any firepower on the offensive end in the Jets, it just feels like it feels like this could be a Howard Miles Sanders 1-2 punch and just run out the clock, make life tough, and then Carson Wentz finishes with like 2 touchdowns on 150 yards. I could be way off. He could throw for 350 and 4 for all I know, because it is the Jets. But I have some reservations about this spot for Wentz, especially with Deshaun Jackson ruled out.
I'm not. I mean, Wentz, we just talked about it. They're a 2 touchdown favorite at home. He should be able to do what he wants, and he should have some success. There's just a lot of other quarterbacks that I think are going to be pushed to maybe, they're going to need to get a win to really try to tap into their ceiling. Whereas the Eagles, whether they're forcing turnovers or just punching in on the ground, there are other ways that they're going to win this game. So I don't have a ton to really say. If you have the money, Zach Ertz, I do think that the big game is coming. He hasn't found the end zone yet, and we know some of the teams have tried to take him away permanently. I'm not sure. Now that Alshon's back, maybe that spreads it a little differently. They did look good against the Packers, so I'm more with you than not. It's not a game where I look to really stack up. Not a ton to say on this Eagles team.
And don't get me wrong, I'm going to have some Carson Wentz. Like, I'm not saying I won't. I just have some concerns that this could be a game that's won on the ground, because when the Eagles rush for 100+ yards, they have a ridiculous win percentage. And when they don't under Peterson, I believe they're 1-13. What about you, Alex? How are you approaching this Eagles team?
I have tepid interest in some of the guys. Zach Ertz is probably my favorite. He hasn't really had a huge game yet, so that makes me think that he'll be a little bit lower on, but it hasn't been for lack of playing time or targets. So I think he makes a really nice play. I'm going to be avoiding the running backs because I think Howard will get way more ownership because of his crazy outlier game last week. But I'm expecting it to be a hot hand situation. And this game, not expected to be particularly competitive, so I'm not really looking at game stacks as much.
Okay. I think this is going to be the Miles Sanders game. Just throwing it out there. On the opposite side, Alex, I mentioned to you guys before the stream that Ian Rappaport had reported right before we started that it was originally believed that Sam Darnold had received most of the first team reps in practice this week. It turns out that he had received all of them, and he's ruled out. So that is the furthest thing from encouraging when it comes to Luke Falk. Now, I actually had interest in Robbie Anderson. Where am I at on him now? I'd say less for sure. But it just felt like one of these spots where you have one of the most forgiving secondaries in the league that's allowed 380-3 to Keenum, 320-3 to Matt Ryan, 422-2 to Aaron Rodgers. Luke Falk is not good. But my guess is that Le'Veon Bell is going to be the guy that everyone runs back in Eagles stacks, and Robbie Anderson goes overlooked entirely. He's played 98% of the snaps this season, and it just feels like even if Luke Falk can heave it up there, assuming that they're playing from behind from early on, I think there's still a chance that Robbie Anderson can get it going. But that whole practice thing, getting those snaps, is definitely more concerning to me. If he had played all week with the first team, I'd have a little bit more confidence that Anderson could break off a big reception. But what are your thoughts on the Jets?
If you're telling me there's a chance, maybe
I am telling you there's a chance.
Yeah, I don't see a ton of value in the Jets, but like they're gonna be so low owned, and we saw last year Robbie Anderson can break a slate. I'm more interested in Bell. I think that whenever you have that volume situation, like regardless of the efficiency, like we saw with Fournette last week, there's that potential that it's just a crazy outlier, and I think he won't be that popular because he's on the Jets.
All right. Yeah, Ben, I expect the Eagles to stifle Le'Veon Bell in the run game. And that's the big difference here. I expect them to shut him down in the run game. They're allowing 62 yards per game to opposing running backs this season. And while they may not have faced any juggernaut rushing attacks, we know that they're very good at limiting opponent run games. But Le'Veon Bell's also going to be out there so much that it warrants us discussing him right now.
Of course. It'll be interesting. I'm certainly going to be, like most, checking out this ownership because David Johnson is a very similar style of what I think we might see from Lev. He's just in such a better matchup because the Eagles defense, like you said, I really think they take away him on the ground. And then we'll see what the Jets can do. It is worth noting, Luke Falk, before Gardner Minshew took the swag god, Luke Falk at Washington State was slinging the ball all over the place for Mike Leach. So we will see. Robbie Anderson is a guy last year, a couple games, I think against Denver, he had like 3 catches for, found the end zone a couple times. He's that type of upside. The thing that I make the most interesting about this situation, he is the exact same price as Will Fuller.
Exact same price, $4,500. Yep.
And we know that people are going to gravitate to Will Fuller, and we've discussed. I totally get that. I'm going to do that as well. When you're talking about that, you can get a straight pivot on a guy that's also playing a ton of snaps and is the same exact guy. You're talking about, okay, if he's getting 1/3, 1/4 of the ownership, is Will Fuller 4 times as likely to crush that matchup in terms of a head-to-head? The answer would be no, in my mind. So I think if you want to mix it up, you can look to Robbie Anderson as a straight pivot off Will Fuller.
It's funny because I mentioned almost verbatim what you just said in an article on awesemo.com this week, Ben. Exact same price. And we're expecting Will Fuller to have, I won't even call it a bounce back game because he hasn't had the games but prior to this that were good. So I still think Will Fuller is a much better play. Like in cash, Will Fuller would be the guy, of course, right?
Yep, absolutely.
His probability of succeeding are definitely higher than Anderson. But like you said, is it 4 times higher than Anderson? They have a higher implied total by a lot. They are bigger favorites. They're actually favorites. But Anderson is still a similar receiver in that he can do big damage on one play. And that's really all we're saying.
For sure. And, like I said, Will Fuller is a guy, I want to be clear, I see the merits playing him. I have him in lineups. But I don't think that we shouldn't discount that Robbie Anderson also is very live to take 2 catches for $110 and a touchdown. That is in the playbook.
That's right. Alex, let me ask you before we move on. Number 1, and you can answer these back to back. Number 1, how much interest do you have in the Eagles defense this week? And number 2, where would you rank Le'Veon Bell? It doesn't have to be exact, but amongst other running backs this week.
I think you gotta have a lot of interest in the Eagles defense as kind of like a spend up option because Luke Falk isn't good, and facing a quarterback that stinks is probably the number 1 factor of what defense you should pick. So that makes a really nice play. It's gonna be popular, but if you have some salary to spend up, I think that's a good option. And Le'Veon Bell is more of a GPP idea for me than anything. So, I mean, I have him below all the guys we mentioned in that tier, Kumara, David Johnson, Christian McCaffrey, Fournette. But that doesn't mean that he doesn't have a significant chance of kind of being the top scoring of the bunch.
Okay, Ben, quickly, same question to you.
What was the question?
Are you willing to pay for the Eagles defense? And where would you prioritize a guy like Le'Veon Bell against the rest of the field in that, $6K and up range at running back?
So if I go all the way up at defense, for me, I would lean to the Bears. I just think with no Tyrell Williams now, that's where I'm going if I go all the way up. Right in line with Alex in terms of the running backs. Lev Bell, I get the narrative. Could he be the top? Sure. But I have most of the guys we mentioned ahead of him just because of the matchup with the Eagles.
Okay. Pittsburgh, Baltimore. Okay, Ben, I'm just going to give you my quick take on this and let you and Alex run with it. Baltimore has been absolutely ravaged in the slot this season, whether it's by Christian Kirk, whether it's by Larry Fitzgerald. Who was it last week? I can't even remember. Who was it last week?
Landry.
Jarvis Landry tortured him. I mentioned that on this show.
Yes, you did.
Landry could be a guy that has his breakout game. He went off for 180 yards. We've seen it happen quite a bit this season. It is a huge liability for this team. They also were coughing up a ton of yards after the catch, and that's no surprise. A lot of it's coming in the slot. So do we have any word on Juju Smith-Schuster? We don't yet, right?
True game time decision is what I've seen.
Okay. This is why I pointed out. I think if Juju plays today, he could be one of the most fly under the radar wide receiver options available. And if you believe in narratives, Mason Rudolph wants to get him involved more. His ownership projection right now is 3%. If he doesn't, Deontay Thompson has ran 50% of his slots out of might have been 40 out of the slot, but the second most compared to Juju. I think he would take over more snaps out of the slot and become that possible Juju that we were looking for at a cheaper price. I'm telling you right now, I'm not sleeping on either of these Pittsburgh receivers. If Juju's active, I like him even at his price. And if Johnson is getting slot looks more with Juju out, I like him as well. I don't expect everyone to agree with this, but I just think Baltimore's defense in the middle of the field has been that bad, even with Earl Thomas healthy.
Yeah, I don't have much to say in this game. I will just say quickly, the Steelers are a 3.5-point dog at home, so it should be competitive. Baltimore's defense, I think everyone has discovered that the name recognition doesn't line up to how good they actually are. Yeah. People overrate this defense. It's just not that good. So it can be attacked. Mason Rudolph, I still think can get it done in relative to maybe what the expectations are. So if Juju's active, I will have some. If not, I will look to Deontay Thompson, as you mentioned. So that's pretty much it. Don't have a ton of interest in stacking the game, though.
Yes, neither do I at all, actually, especially given that I have no idea how the running back situation is going to shake out in Pittsburgh with Connor and Samuel there. It makes it more difficult. But what are your thoughts here, Alex?
Yeah, it's going to come down a lot to these questionable players, Juju Smith-Schuster, and also Vance McDonald. I don't know if he is confirmed one way or the other. So if they're both out, that could create some opportunity for some other guys. But I do think that Juju will be a nice kind of like sleeper play this week. A guy with top end talent that just hasn't gotten it going this year so far. So I think that makes a nice GPP play.
Okay. What are you doing with Baltimore, Alex? I know at awesomeo.com looking at our projections, Mark Andrews was somebody that definitely popped a bit, has a 13.2 DraftKings point projection here, and should be relatively popular. Right now, Andrews' projected ownership is coming in at right around 12%. How are you approaching the Baltimore team, whether it be Andrews, Brown, Lamar Jackson, Ingram? But I think it's probably only logical that we start with the tight end here.
I gotta give a shout out to Adam Scher, our buddy, Ship My Money DFS, because he won this fantasy draft tournament last week with Lamar Jackson, Mark Andrews stack.
There it is.
So I think that it has GPP winning potential for sure. And Andrews is the easiest guy to pair with Lamar Jackson because the position is the weakest at tight end, and he's been really good so far this year. So I think that makes a nice play.
Okay, what about you, Ben? Just break down the Baltimore team. We'll move on. We don't have a ton of time here.
Yeah, not much to say. I think it's pretty easy. You kind of look at Lamar. He's got a home run threat in Hollywood Brown. He's got more of a safety blanket in Andrews. They're going to be involved. I don't love the matchup. I do think Pittsburgh kind of can hang in this game. It's a big game for the North, so should be competitive throughout. But as Alex mentioned, when you have a pretty condensed offensive plan, you can look to these guys because you really know he doesn't have much else to lean on.
Right. Okay. Let's talk about Tennessee and Buffalo. Ben, Josh Allen is expected to play, so you have that. He's out of concussion protocol. He should be on the field, and he should be taking all the offensive snaps for the Buffalo Bills. This game, however, doesn't really scream fantasy value. It has the lowest over-under on the slate at 39.5. And the Bills have an implied total of 18, Tennessee at 21.3. Not really that appealing on either side, but maybe you have a few guys you like. I don't know.
Not really. It's just a bad game. Should be a grinded out style. It's good for the Bills that Josh Allen is playing for sure. That would have really put pressure on these other guys in terms of their skill position. But, someone like Cole Beasley, I don't see enough upside. John Brown, we know he's got the home run upside. It's just, I feel more often than not, you're not going to get a return there. So I really don't have much to say about the Bills. And then on the other side, and I'll pass it to you, Alex. I would assume the Titans just run Derrick Henry into the ground as much as possible. The way to attack the Bills is on the ground. That's what the Titans want to do in general. So he would be the guy for me. Do you like him as well?
I think he's kind of on my radar. There's so many great options at running back that he might be kind of passed over in my
especially in that price range with Fournette and Mixon.
Yeah, but as you guys are talking about, I mean, he could just dominate this game for sure. And having a guy that's in a game no one is on, that has some value to it. So I think that he makes a nice play.
Yeah. I've mentioned a couple times this before the season began that I think that Derrick Henry is going to see 300 plus carries this season. He's on pace right now for 312. I think he'll come in right around that. So Ben, I don't disagree that like if there ever is any allure when it comes to Henry, it's just that if this is a neutral or favorable game script, he's going to get force fed the football.
Oh, no doubt. And like I said, when you have one of the things that clearly lines up is when you have a team that has a pretty obvious game plan of what they want to do, and then the team they're playing, the game plan would be that if you just looked at what would make sense to do, that's where it really lines up. The way to attack the Bills is on the ground. That's what the Titans want to do naturally. So it makes no sense to try to, attack these corners with guys like Corey Davis.
All right. We've got 1, 2, 3 games left here, but I want to let you know that Fantasy Draft is the sponsor of the Deeper Dive. That's where Adam Scher won his 100K last week. A fine showing from our boy Ship My Money DFS. Fantasy Draft is the only rake-free daily fantasy site. They're bringing the heat again. The $500,000 guaranteed rake-free contest, the Hooter main event. It's the largest and only rake-free contest of its kind that you will find for week 5 or probably any other week. And only on Fantasy Draft are 100% of entry fees paid to the contest winners. You can sign up at fantasydraft.com with referral code AWESEMO, AWESEMO, and you'll get a free 7-day trial membership. Fantasydraft.com. It's the $500,000 rake-free Hooters main event, largest rake-free contest of its kind that you're going to find anywhere in the DFS industry this week. So remember, the referral code is AWESEMO, AWESEMO. Head over there now, fantasydraft.com. Get your free 7-day trial membership and win some money. All right, boys, here we go. Washington, New England Patriots. Alex, biggest favorites on the slate. That is the New England Patriots. 16.5 points here, 29-point implied total. And they are what? Let's say 42 over under. Yeah, 42 over under. It's just very difficult to gauge which of these players will have the big game. I know we have James White projected pretty high this week. Rex Burkhead is already out. Sonny Michel's been ineffective on the ground and isn't involved in the passing game. And then, of course, Julian Edelman has been practicing. My guess is that he will definitely play. What are we doing with the Patriots in Washington?
I think there are some one-offs in this game that are pretty viable, like James White you mentioned. Rex Burkhead being out should solidify his role in passing downs for sure. So I think he's a good option. I like Josh Gordon. He's someone that I don't think he's going to be super popular, and he's got a lot of GPP potential. And Edelman, of course, also in the mix.
Okay, Ben?
I mean, it's the Patriots. We say this every week. Could come from anywhere. James White certainly makes sense. I will say that I have some Sonny Michel. He's getting the carries. He's produced absolutely nothing. I do think that over the course of the year, we are going to see a Patriot game where they just absolutely dominate on the ground solely. And you got to just hope that Michel gets those touchdowns. So I'm, attacking sporadically. You can't stack it up because I don't even think running it back with any Redskin makes much sense in a situation like this.
I don't either. I don't really see the need to get there. Do you want to talk about anything else from this game? I want to make sure we give everything reasonable allotment of time. But Alex, is there anything else we want to get to here?
You're muted.
Thanks, man. I'll throw out Chris Thompson as kind of a run back option because he should be in the game a lot if Washington is trailing.
Okay. Makes sense to me then. Denver and the Chargers. Okay, Ben, let's break down this running back situation. Melvin Gordon will play, and we saw Anthony Lynn basically say that he will get a decent amount of work. He's not going to give him too much, but he's going to get enough. It's really difficult to say. If I had to guess, probably like even workload between him and Eckler, but it's really hard to gauge. Maybe you can help us break it down further because it's a pretty important spot this week against the Denver Broncos.
It is. It's just very tough because A, we don't know, and B, it's just such a cannibalized situation. Gordon is going to take some of that, maybe the red zone looks. Now, Eckler has the ability, and we've seen him really maximize some of these chances in terms of finding the end zone. I'm pretty skeptical. I'm not going to lie. Now, he's burnt me before. Still should catch some passes, which is going to raise the floor. But I think it is reasonable to think that Melvin Gordon takes maybe half or more of these touches, and that is a huge reassessment of what we've seen from the Chargers so far.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know. At this point, I'm having a tough time gauging what we're going to see in this backfield, Alex.
Yeah, I think it's impossible to really know. I think the most likely outcome is that Eckler will get close to as much work as he did with Justin Jackson as the backup in this first game with Melvin Gordon playing. Maybe a little bit less of the shares, but I mean, the coaches have the upper hand here. We just have no idea what they're thinking.
Right. What are you doing with this team then? Of course, Keenan Allen included.
I think Eckler is just like top dollar now because he's been so good this year. So that makes him a little bit harder to get to with this situation not being as good as last week when Troy Pope was backing him up. But Keenan Allen, I think that with Hunter Henry out, still a great play. Mike Williams is back, so not quite as good as last week again. But he really burned people last week, so maybe people will not go back to him this week.
Okay. Yeah, Ben, where are you going with this whole offense for the Chargers?
Not much, to be honest. I think you can look to Rivers and Keenan Allen as a pretty safe pairing, but when you get beyond that, to me, there's just other spots across this slate that make more sense when we're trying to infer new roles, maybe people stepping up. So the Chargers, I know Keenan Allen's going to get to work, and as Alex said, he burnt some people last week. That's where I'll allocate shares if I do go to this game.
Okay. The Denver side of the ball, is there anything that stands out to you here? Manny Sanders, Sutton. Do you look towards a relatively cheap Phillip Lindsay?
For me, actually, it's Noah Fant, who is another guy off of Eifert that you can really get. He's sub 3K on DraftKings, seeing some work, and he's a pretty athletic guy. So I could see them going to him against a team where the Chargers have a lot of deficiency. We talked about all the injuries in the passing game. Maybe they still can get up, and it forces the Broncos to get going. So you've got Sutton, you've got Sanders, but I still think there's plenty of room for a guy like Noah Fant to get in the mix and pay off a really cheap price tag.
Okay. Yeah. What are your thoughts on the Denver side of the ball, Alex?
I like Emmanuel Sanders and Cortland Sutton as kind of GPP plays because they haven't really done that much this far, but they're getting a lot of targets. And Joe Flacco, not my favorite fantasy quarterback, but he throws a lot, so they could definitely get there.
Okay. And we, of course, waiting for news here. We should get it shortly, but live before lock with Josh Engelman and Chris Baggs, they're going to take you up until lock starting at 12 noon. So that'll give you everything you need to know. We should have all the 1 o'clock news by then. There's no reason we shouldn't. And then you'll just have to pay close attention. But only 2 4 o'clock games, which should make things a little bit easier in terms of injury news, Alex. And here is our last and final game of the slate, Green Bay and Dallas. By the way, the two Erics will be on with you for Sunday Night Football, the Showdown show tonight. Tune into that at 7:30 Eastern Time, youtube.com/awesomeo. Green Bay's run defense got exposed last week through a monster game from Howard and very efficient game from Miles Sanders on the ground. They got gashed on multiple occasions, up the middle and bounced outside. It was pretty ugly. let's start with Ezekiel Elliott here, Alex. As I mentioned, I want to give sufficient time to all of these top price running backs so everyone knows exactly where we stand on them. Is he muted again?
Oh yeah.
My bad.
It'll get
I think
you.
Elliott and Aaron Jones seem like pretty good options, but they're really not comparing to the top options on the slate for me. Ezekiel Elliott, I think that his role is a little bit reduced from last year, so I'm gonna wait till his price comes down, and I think Green Bay, although they've given up a lot of rushing yards this year, not the easiest matchup for the team as a whole, so probably a reduced touchdown upside, and then it's even worse for Aaron Jones as far as matchup. The only reason I would think about him is because Jamal Williams is out.
Okay, Ben.
So yeah, Aaron Jones, it's tricky because everybody's been waiting. Oh, he needs to get all the work. He probably is here, but it's a brutal matchup. So I don't know what to expect there. I'm a little higher on Zeke, I think, than Alex is, just because of that matchup. We saw, the Eagles expose the Packers, and on the flip side, he was really stifled against the tough Saints defense last week. So I have a feeling this could be a get right spot for him in particular, where they control the game on the ground, really pound it, and ultimately, I think, win a tough game at home.
Yeah, something that I find interesting is with Ezekiel Elliott, it's like he's definitely not getting nearly as much love as McCaffrey. And look, I get why. McCaffrey's on the field an egregious amount. But Zeke also played 97% of the snaps last week in a game where he was desperately needed, right? They played Miami. They played the Redskins. They played the Giants. That was the first difficult game, the first tough matchup, and he played 97% of the snaps. Yeah. So I just don't see this as a spot where, like McCaffrey, yes, of course, his involvement is insane. But Gallup's coming back after an injury. How much will he be used? Amari Cooper, it's a tough matchup for him. Like, I think, Ben, this could be a spot where Ezekiel Elliott, sees upwards of, 29, 30 total looks.
For sure. And like I said, I understand McCaffrey is in a stratosphere that we're just not seeing.
Right. Correct.
I'm not debating that, but I'm saying that Zeke is someone, as you mentioned, I don't think it's an indication when they are cruising, maybe they ease off the gas and give it to Pollard. But in tough matchups like this is a big NFC game. I do not worry about the volume at all for Zeke at home against a team that you do want to attack on the ground. We saw Jordan Howard tear him up, so Zeke should have no problem getting his.
What are your thoughts on the opposite side, Alex, with Marquez Valdez-Scantling likely being your number one receiver here? Devontae Adams has already been ruled out. And then, of course, in the backfield, Jamal Williams took a nasty hit on Thursday Night Football. He has also been ruled out. So two guys, the best receiver on the team, hands down, and then a backup running back who had been seeing a decent amount of opportunities. Both of them are sidelined today.
I think it does create some opportunities for some other guys. Valdez-Scantling, in particular, should get more targets this game. The main problem I have is that his price also went up this week for whatever reason. So just the matchup being tough makes it so I'm not really getting there. One guy I am looking to is Jake Kumara. He's dirt cheap in comparison, and with Adams out, I think that Allison becomes a 2, and then Kumara becomes a 3, and that should be a decent fantasy spot.
What about you, Ben?
It's tough. MVS is someone that you naturally look at and you think, wow, he's going to have a lot more work, but the price doesn't appeal to me. And I actually had trouble getting to these Packers, and most of my builds, they were in kind of a dead zone across the board. So maybe as a last man in, I could look to him. As I mentioned, I don't love Aaron Jones in this spot either. It's just in a game that I don't know how effective they'll be against Dallas defense, and Matt LaFleur, he doesn't seem to mind grinding games out. I'm not sure how high the ceiling is across the board for any of the Packers options.
Okay. I do like Marquez Valdez-Scantling. I guess one of the questions here is, when stacked up against players at his position similarly priced, as Alex pointed out, the price is up there now, so you are paying a little bit for him. But I do think that he becomes a very interesting play. Ben, what about Jimmy Graham, who saw a lot of targets upon Adams' exit last week and failed to produce on that 4th and goal?
He had 9 targets last week, and maybe that's something that continues. But at the same time, I found myself either going all the way up to someone like Ertz or Waller, or just paying down into the Eifert, for me, Noah Fant, Jared Cook type range. So once again, it's an awkward build, and sometimes that happens. I don't hate the play in a vacuum, but when I actually made my lineups, I didn't get to much.
Okay. That'll do it. Unless you got anything to add here, Alex, from either side of this game. I don't want to forget anything.
Nah, it's a game where I think it'll be a great one to watch, but not the ideal fantasy spot for either team.
Yep.
All right. Hey, before you head out, if you enjoy the show, you want to help support us, hit us with a thumbs up, like the video, subscribe, and hit the notification bell as well. It makes it so that we can continue to give you free content each and every day here at Awesemo and on youtube.com/Awesemo. Wish you guys the best of luck today. Somebody take something big down. And if you do, Manny, Laura, and I on the NFL Strategy Show Week 5 recap, we'll talk about it. How's that for incentive? All right, we'll see you back here next week on the NFL Deeper Dive presented by FantasyDraft.com. NFL Live Before Locks coming up at noon. So stop back soon. We'll see you back here next week.